Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening, and this is the 7:30 hearing. It's the application of Michael and Laurie Nooner. The application is dated May 18th, 2018, and the applicants are seeking a variance from the Milton zoning bylaw. They propose to build an addition to their to the left side of their single-family home, which is located at 11 Foster Lane in Milton. The bylaw requires that new buildings be set back a minimum distance of 30 feet from the rear property line. And here the applicant is proposing to build 15 feet 7 inches from the rear property line. And they're both present this evening to tell us why we should allow this application for variance. Let me cover some of the ceremonial things for a couple of minutes. I've summarized the advertisement. As evidence at the hearing, we'll have the May 18th application signed by Mr. and Mrs. Nooner. We have a May 5th, strike it, May 9th, 2018 denial letter from Mr. Prondek. We have a plot plan of the subject property from Michael Paul Antonino, which should be dated. I'm sure it is. I don't quite see it. Well, in any event, it's attached to the application, and we have a set of conceptual building plans called Addition to Single-Family Residence, and they are, I can't even read the date, it's so small. Do you know the date of these plans? Is it February or?
It's February.
It looks like February 10th.
Maybe 18?
February 19th.
February 19th, 2018. And they're prepared by JSG Architecture from Milton, Massachusetts, Mr. Gianduso, I believe. It's been at the Board of Appeals hearings on numerous occasions. In terms of introductions, my name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. To my immediate left is board member Jeffrey Mullen, and to my immediate right is board member Stephen Lundbohm. The rules of the board are such: we'll hear from the applicants, and we'll hear from anyone who went through as questions of the applicant. We'll hear people who wish to speak in support or opposition to this application for variance. The proceedings tonight are being televised, but they're also being tape recorded, and under the rules of the board, it's the tape recording that's the official record of the Board of Appeals, and not the television. So without further ado, Mr. and Mrs. Nooner, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us about your proposed addition and why the board should allow this application for variance?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Michael Nooner. This is my wife, Laurie. In 2015, about almost 3 years ago, we moved from Boston, looking for community which to raise our family.
That was a good thing.
Yes.
Welcome to Milton.
Thank you. We found the perfect place. We looked at East Milton and just immediately realized this is everything we could have imagined. Close to the city, great community, great schools, and we found a perfect house, and it was perfect, you know. So we bought our home on Foster Lane, and you know, we hope to live there for the rest of our days here on this earth. You know, we have 3 children. At the time we bought the house, we had 2 children. We have an 8-year-old, Sophia. She's entering the 3rd grade at the Cunningham. We have a 5-year-old boy, Brendan. He's entering kindergarten at the Cunningham. And we have a newborn. We have Charlotte, who's 16 weeks old as of yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
You don't look like you've lost as much sleep as you should have.
She's a great sleeper. Well, she was up until 3 days ago, but yeah, she's a great
You must
sleeper.
be worried about your application.
She must be.
She is. Her bedroom depends on it.
Did Mr. Corcoran tell you to say that?
Oh, no.
No, he didn't.
No.
Okay. Spontaneous comments.
Our current home is a 3-bedroom. We have 1,260 square feet of living space with a sunroom that gives us about another 138 square feet. In order to support the needs of our family, We need an additional bedroom and some additional living space. Right now, Charlotte's living she's sleeping in a crib in our room, and we don't have enough room to put a bed in any of the other bedrooms. It's just, we need more space. To that end, we hired a local Milton architect who's here with us tonight, Joe Genduso, and he drew up plans that accomplish the goals of creating the space that we need for a family, we're also being mindful of the neighbors' expectations of privacy and the overall aesthetic beauty of the neighborhood. The proposed renovation, it uses the existing footprints of the home, using the patio space to the left rear of our home. The proposed renovation does not extend the home any further back than it is currently, or any further to the side than it is currently. We're going straight back and straight across. We're just using the space over the patio that is now unused. And we're gonna build up to it's a two-story addition. Because of the placement of the home on the property, a variance is needed to do the renovations.
You know when the home was built?
It was built in 2003. And when it was built in 2003, it's my understanding that it was originally a barn. It was subdivided in 2003 from the property at 603 Adams Street. And it was a barn, a horse barn at that time. And when they did the subdivision in 2003, it required a variance at that time to build a single-family home where we are on 11 Foster Lane. And at that time, the variance was approved. We've spoken with the neighbors regarding the proposal, and everybody's been supportive of the project. We've spoken with all of our direct abutters. We've spoken with, and none of them oppose, and they all, in fact, support the project. And we've spoken with additional neighbors too. I have some letters of support that I'd like to submit for your
That'd be great,
support.
thank you very much.
There are letters from three of our direct abutters. We have four direct abutters. Bill Roach at 603 Adams, Bill Roach and Claudia Clifford at 603 Adams Street is a letter there. John and Tess Powell at 599 Adams Street, there's a letter of support there as well. And Steve and Lisa DeLuca, who's to the left of our property on 25 Foster Lane, they've also submitted a letter of support. There's another letter of support in there from Tom E. and Kerry Walsh at 33 Foster Lane, who's not a direct abutter, but they wanted to voice their support for the proposal as well. We've also spoken with the fourth direct abutter, who's at 18 Pear Street, Eleanor Foster. We wrote her a letter, and she called back and left us a sweet voicemail expressing support and wishing us luck here tonight. And I also spoke with my wife and I spoke with another neighbor, Andy D'Amato at 26 Pear Street, and he had some questions. We were able to answer them, and he doesn't oppose the project. He doesn't oppose it either. So, with that being said, I just humbly request that the group variance be granted.
Good, I've just got a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one is, you're extraordinarily well prepared. What law firm do you work for?
Malone and Associates.
Malone and Associates, okay, that's great. Well,
Jerry Malone, I don't know if you know the name. He's
the name, yes, I do know the name. I don't know Mr. Malone, but I've
Yeah.
heard of him before, and so that's good. You get some free advertising. Same time as you're
Thank you.
appearing for your variance application. Is it true, Mr. Nuna, that the proposed addition is going to be constructed substantially in accordance with Mr. Gianduso's plans that are attached to this?
Yeah, I mean, they're very, very minor changes, and nothing that would extend the line past the 15.7 in the rear.
Okay. And do these plans and the typical drawings here, do they accurately reflect what you're going to build?
Yes,
Okay. And is that reasonably consistent with the rest of the house? So
yes,
it's being tied into the...
yes, it is.
Okay, great. I don't have any further questions. Mr. Mullen, do you
What
have any
was the
questions?
prior variance for?
I believe it was for the rear yards, because of the location of the barn on the property. They wanted to build the home where the barn was.
We have a variance for the 15.7 already, and this variance is because we're exacerbating that by increasing the nonconformity? Is that what this application's about?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't.
I don't think so either.
The way you say it, I don't think it's exacerbating it at all. It's going to be 15.7. It was 15.7. It's going to be 15.7.
No, I know, but it's considered, you need the variance because it's inconsistent with the prior variance. It's for the same issue. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
We're just extending that wall plane to accommodate the addition there.
We amending that variance?
No, I think we're granting a new
New
variance.
variance.
The application is seeking a new variance.
Yes.
I think because we're new owners, so I think that's why we need to.
I'm not sure about that, but you're better having a new variance. And nice, then you can, if you get the variance, you can file it with the Registry of Deeds, and it will bring everything together, rather than taking an old variance. Do you know whether Mr. Mullen or I sat on that earlier variance?
He doesn't know. How does he know?
I don't know.
You probably read the earlier variance, didn't you?
I did at
You
some
did.
point, but I can't tell you that I
It's just a
remember.
foggy mess.
Yeah,
Who the
yeah,
board
I-
members were.
I apologize. I guess I'm not so well prepared after all.
No, it's a tricky lawyer's question, that's all. You were doing so well. Go ahead, Mr. Mullen.
Well, my only comment is that the board shouldn't be blind to the earlier variance. We should at least acknowledge the earlier variance and recognize it as we consider this, that's all.
Yeah.
That's my only comment.
Oh,
Mr. Lundbaum, please.
I know that Mr. Prondak, he mentions it in
Yeah.
his denial letter. I don't have any questions. Just-
Okay, well, I don't have any further questions. Unless you have something further to add, why don't we see if there's anybody out there who has any questions of the applicant or otherwise wishes to speak in favor of this variance application. So the record's going to reflect that there's no such person present. Is there anyone present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to this variance application? Thundering silence. So if you have nothing further to add, and you don't,
I don't.
it's better to quit while you're ahead. What we'll do is we're going to end the evidence portion of this hearing, and we will discuss the application in open session and vote on it here and now. So, Mr. Lundbaum, do you want to be
Thank
here
you,
first?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very well-presented application, Mr. Noonan. Thank you for the information and the diagrams. Obviously has merit, a well-demonstrated need at this point, very tasteful design. It looks as if you're just basically going to square off the back portion of the house, add that extra bedroom. We've granted this type of relief in the past. I would tend to vote in favor of the application.
Okay.
I
Mr.
agree with
Mullen?
all that.
Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think this was an exceptionally well-presented application for a
Malone and
variance.
Associates.
Yes, he's writing that down. I don't know what this means, but actually, most people under these circumstances would have Laurie, Mrs. Noonan, present the application. But I think they do that for a strategic reason. But this was a well-presented application. There's a great need for this. You have a beautiful home, beautiful family. Charlotte needs it. Nobody opposes it. You've got a great architect. So I intend to vote for this application with the usual conditions. And those usual conditions are just that the addition will be constructed in substantial conformity with Mr. Gianduso's plans. And if there's any substantial tweaks or whatever, hopefully you can work that out with the building inspector directly rather than having to come back to see us. You probably know this, but I'll say it anyway. After we vote the variance, make sure you record a copy of the variance with the Registry of Deeds, so your title is kept up to date. So all those in favor of granting this application for a variance with the usual conditions?
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah, oh, bless you.
Aye.
Aye. So congratulations, 3-0, you win.
Thank you.
Thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
No, you can take it. No, no, no. Take it. No, no, no.
You had the summer, you had the whole winter off.
Well,
I wanted it.
You want to do it?
okay, let Stephen do it. Hey, you,
Okay, thank you.
Knock yourself out.
sorry, we're keeping you up.
Just stay on topic.
Do my best. Very difficult. A little bit rusty.
What number Squantum Street?
Oh, welcome back is what I say.
Mr. Corcoran, you all set for the second hearing? Okay. All right, we're going to call to order our 7. It's here. Oh, I think. Here it is here. Bear with me, folks. Yes. Okay, this is a 7:45 hearing. It's 7:50, which isn't too bad, and this hearing involves the application of the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston, dated May 21st, 2018, filed with the Board of Appeals. They're seeking a special permit from the Milton zoning bylaw, and the purpose is to enable the applicant to temporarily park cars of the employees, or some of the employees of the Beth Israel Deaconess Milton Hospital in the parking lot of St. Elizabeth's Church, which is at 350 Reedsdale Road, while the hospital is exploring ways to expand its parking capacity. The hospital proposes to employ a shuttle service to move the employees to and from the church parking lot. The use regulations require the issuance of a special permit for that particular use. The property here is located in the Residence C zoning district. I think we all know where it is. As evidence at the hearing, we're going to have the application filed by Attorney Edward J. Corcoran of Quincy, Massachusetts, but a Milton resident, together with an addendum, which Mr. Corcoran attaches Mr. Prondak's denial letter dated May 14, 2018, a license agreement between the Archdiocese and the hospital, and certain maps of the St. Elizabeth Church property. He discusses the application, and he comes to a conclusion that it's not unexpected. And we have some aerial photographs of the church parking lot. And we have a series of guidelines that are attached to the application dated April blank 2018, talking about the employees' responsibilities if the special permit issues using this parking lot and being aware of the neighbors and keeping the parking lot free of trash and debris, and there may be other uses of the parking lot, such as funerals and school buses and the like. So those are attached. And then another larger aerial photograph, which shows a delineation in red, which I presume is the area that the hospital is seeking to use for temporary parking purposes. Yes, with the last hearing, my name's John Leonard. We have Jeffrey Mullen with me and Stephen Lundbaum. The rules of the board are going to be the same as the last hearing. I know Mr. Corcoran is well familiar with the rules and has heard them too many times. So welcome back to the Board of Appeals. Mr. Corcoran, we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is an application that I filed on behalf of the BID Milton Hospital and in conjunction with the Archdiocese of Boston, which owns the church, St. Elizabeth's Church property at 350 Reedsdale Road. I have filed it with the authority of each party. In April of this year, the parties entered into a license agreement pursuant to which the hospital was going to lease 50 spaces per day, per weekday, for employee parking. If you've been to the hospital at all lately, parking is overwhelming the site. The hospital's become, I suppose, a victim of its own success.
That's what I was just going to say.
Has been, they employ on-site valet service for patients and other visitors to the hospital, but they're really scrapping to look for alternative locations for parking until they are able to pursue a broader campus master plan and consider ways that they can come back to the town to expand perhaps their campus, but also their parking relative to that. Shortly after the license agreement went into effect, which was May 1 of this year, Mr. Prondak issued a cease and desist or a notice of the violation relative to that, essentially because, in his opinion, and I can't say I disagree with it, the hospital use of the church property would be regulated under Section 3A7E of the bylaw, which deals with the hospital's uses in general. The hospital exists pursuant to special permit that was granted under that section, and its expansion over time was done pursuant to amendments to permits or new permits associated with that provision of the bylaw. And I think certainly Mr. Prondak's position is that the use of other property in town by the hospital would be guided by the hospital's rights in that regard. I think that separately, the church is substantially exempt from zoning under the Dover Amendment. Whether this relationship falls outside of that use is a question, but we're here seeking a special permit to allow the hospital to park in that location. I did provide a redacted copy of the license agreement, at least redacting out the value of the monthly compensation. I can say that it's fairly substantial. And then attached, obviously drawn in red are the spaces that are particularly represented within the license. Lastly, as you pointed out, one of the exhibits to the license is the notification to employees of the hospital who would be using that premises, rules and regulations to how they would use it, how they would be careful to not spread debris, to be quiet, mindful of car radios, volumes, car alarms, and the like, particularly because the starting time for the use of this parking lot is 6:45 a.m. The hospital does run a shuttle service over. It's about a quarter of a mile distant between the hospital and the St. Elizabeth parking area, so they do run shuttle throughout the day. And with that, I would ask the board to make a finding that the special permit can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially derogating from the intent of the bylaw. I would point, one other thing I'd point out is that there's a provision in the license agreement that prohibits it from being recorded, so the license agreement, if the board were to issue a special permit, we just ask that the board would not attach the license agreement to a decision that it may issue, because the license specifically speaks to non-recording of that license agreement. The recording would be a violation of the license.
With respect to your Dover Amendment argument, does the Dover Amendment apply if the church is using the property for a non-church related purpose?
I'm not sure that it does. It's not why I'm not really making it. I think it's really about the hospital's use of that property as an extension of its own.
Of its own special permits
special
and
permit,
rights?
right.
Do you, tell me something about the planning process that's going on at the hospital with respect to particularly parking, not the expansion of the hospital and all of that.
Well, they're doing a couple of things. They are looking at other temporary parking arrangements. I've spoken to the owners of the Yulin Rink. But they're also looking at its own campus to determine whether they can build at-grade parking on its property and/or whether it can build additional structural parking. There is a parking deck with 81 cars. They're also looking at whether and under what circumstances they might expand the physical campus within their property, adding more buildings and taking advantage of that type of building program to build additional parking with it. They're a long way down the road before they get there. There's a significant neighbor process they'll have to get into. There'll be a planning process with the selectmen and the planning board presumably, and obviously within considerations of their own board as to how they would move forward. So in the interim, knowing that the development of any longer-term solution is probably 3 to 5 years away, if you're thinking about permitting, physical construction, et cetera, that they've got this interim need to address parking, and whether the length of a permit would be limited to in time to 5 years with a renewal, depending on where they are, or some shorter period in the consideration of the board would be obviously the board's discretion. But I know that, I'm working with them on a host of issues relative to their capacity to expand, and they've got Conservation Commission issues, they've got lots of issues, and they've been before this board on a number of prior occasions. Some of the issues have been difficult, some of the issues have been benign. Everything that the hospital does touches on its neighbors. It is surrounded, it's got the ladder streets, Spafford Road, as you go to the east. You've got some neighbors directly across on Highland. You've got neighbors directly across on Reedsdale. On the westerly side, they abut the library and the police station. So, if you were thinking about starting points of where they would look, they may look to green space in that area to see about further expansion. But they haven't begun. They haven't really gotten far down the road relative to hiring of consultants and people to do all that type of master plan, design, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Mr. Mullen?
What is happening now out there,
Where?
out at St. E's,
They're parking.
even though the commissioner issued a cease and desist
Well,
order?
he issued a notice of violation. He did not order a cease and desist, and he agreed that during the pendency of this appeal, that the parking would continue. So they haven't stopped parking.
Is he aware of that?
Yes. He and I spoke directly about that.
And how's it going?
It seems to be fine. I haven't heard any issues, either from the church side, through the Archdiocese, I've been directly in communication with the General Counsel's office and also with the hospital.
What kind of shuttle is it?
I think it's a, it's sort of a 14 to 15 seat van.
Yeah. So how much of the parking problem is resolved with this 60 spaces? What kind of percentage? Is it helpful? Is it just making a dent? Does it solve it completely?
Does not solve it completely. They're looking at other alternatives. It does make a dent, particularly because, daytime employees having the ability to move that volume of parking off campus, when an employee comes, unless there's a reason to leave during the day, that car sits in a space for the duration of the day.
Right.
And so that's 60 spaces that are freed up for the churn of volume occurs throughout the day, with people coming to and from appointments in the medical building, people coming to and from various appointments, day surgery, out surgery, visitors to patients who are overnight. And so they've become, it is pretty significant, the success of this hospital. And one of the things that's driving that success, they've attracted world-class talent to the hospital. Their relationship with the B.I. Deaconess Hospital in the city is significant. This is the sort of the tertiary care, primary care versus the tertiary care that you get in the city. Anything that's over, people come here, they know if it's over their pay grade, they're 20 minutes to the B.I. Medical Center. But they've got, Dr. Dennis Burke, who's one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the world, and he is now walking to work because he lives up the
Drives the
hill.
We know where he
motorcycle
lives.
to work.
We know where he lives.
So he's now no longer at the Mass General, he's here, and he's attracting significant interest and support.
He's not
So
causing the parking problems, is he?
the parking problem is being driven by the combination of all of that success. And so, and it is a physically constrained site.
I know you mentioned time. This thing expires on April 30th, 2019. It doesn't sound like the parking issue is going to be resolved. Are you asking for the special permit to extend beyond the term of the license with the Archdiocese?
Yes, assuming that the license would be renewable, maybe renewable beyond the term of the license. It speaks to a specific term, but it's possible that it may be renewed. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to park there without the renewal.
How long are you asking for the special permit?
I mean, I would think 3 years would be sufficient. And in 3 years, if that relationship needs to continue, we can come back and seek a renewal of the permit, or an extension of the permit.
I don't have any further questions right now.
And if the permit wasn't extended after the first year, this special permit would expire
That's right.
by operation of law.
Right.
Mr. Lundbaum, please.
I had a question. Did you say, Mr. Corcoran, that the hospital was looking for 50 spots? Because I think the license says 60.
60?
And I did request 60. I apologize. I misread my own application. So we're looking for 60.
60. Otherwise, you may have to park down at St. Elizabeth's. They won't find space for you over the last.
They might tell me to stay in Quincy.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lundbaum?
And would you, or could you anticipate that next time around, if you were looking for renewal, that the number of spaces could increase? Or a request could, for additional spaces could?
I suppose, I mean, one of the things that's difficult from the church's perspective in the volume of parking spaces that it can make available is the fact that there are periodic funerals and other daytime needs for those same parking spaces. So I think the church is limited by the number of spaces that it can make available without overburdening itself relative to those things. So I think they were careful to craft this number, identifying the location sort of furthest away from the doors of the church, so that the church patrons themselves, churchgoers themselves would have more convenient access.
Is that shuttle running on any specific schedule? Maybe 15 minutes or something, or is it just sort of?
I think it's running fairly regularly. I don't know I don't know the specific schedule, but certainly during the morning commute in and the afternoon commute out, they would be running shuttles.
I have another question I can.
I think what the hospital also did was sort of assign the specific space to a specific employee. I don't know that for certain, but they have to be careful that they're not sending more than 60 people.
And as far as you know, since this, I guess, went into effect early in May, you've not heard of any opposition or issues with any of the neighbors or the abutters?
I haven't. I don't know specifically whether Mr. Prondak may have, but certainly something drew his attention.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Are these spaces going to be physically separated from the general parking lot of the church? We see this red line here, but is there going to be a line on the ground, or are there going to be little signs that are going to say
I don't think so. I think that,
hospital parking only or something?
you know, the license, I drew that because it was clearer than the map that was attached to the license, but it's the same, they're the same spaces.
See, my concern, if there's a funeral mass in there or something like that, and this isn't delineated in some way, you could find people parking here, so then your employees are going to be parking elsewhere, and
I suppose that's true, although I think that most of these employees are coming before the start of a funeral mass. This is really.
well, they have a 7 o'clock mass, I think, don't they have the daily mass?
Well,
Yeah, it's 7
They
o'clock.
have that's right.
It's
and-
a few faithful people who are really dedicated to their religion. So, yeah, other than the bus driver, or what do you call him? He's not a bus driver. He's a shuttle bus, a little small shuttle bus, picking up the people and taking them back and forth. Is there going to be any other supervised employee of the hospital who's going to be there?
No, there's no one there monitoring those spaces throughout the day. Probably the shuttle bus driver as he's going by,
So you don't have a security service or anything that's going to,
not that I know of.
okay? And who's going to be responsible for, well, I guess for just public safety or plowing of that lot? It's not going to be specially lighted. You're using the same lights that are there. Is BI Deaconess Milton going to be responsible for the plowing of that, or under the license?
The
or is
license
that-
provides that the church is responsible for snow removal, because it's plowing its whole lot. It requires that the licensee have certain insurances, provide certificates of insurance.
Naming the archdiocese on the policy? Okay. And does that apply for other people who are using the lot? If somebody's going to a funeral mass or something and the funeral's over and they're struck by one of the employees' cars, it's,
I would say that, yes, it would apply to anything that might occur from the operation by the hospital of that portion of the lot. Certainly, the driver struck, then his or her insurance would be primary, but there would certainly be secondary insurance available through the hospital.
I'm not an insurance lawyer, but I think that could be a very confusing situation of ownership and insurability, and who has primary responsibility and secondary, and could be.
I'm sure that the archdiocese is insured. It required that the hospital provide certain types of insurance, individual drivers are required to be insured. In the tort world, what little I understand of it is that you go after everybody and anybody who's got access to insurance.
Right, but a lot of people, if their property is damaged, if fender is damaged or something, they'd like to get the claim paid and don't want to sue
I understand.
the Archdiocese of Boston, Cardinal Sean. Okay, Mr. Mullen, do you have any? Let's thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Is there anybody present this evening who either has questions of Mr. Corcoran or wishes to speak in support of this application? And there's no such person present. Is there anybody present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to the present application? Yes, sir. Yeah, no, you have to come up here because these are, well, they're microphones, but they don't project. They're just for the purposes of the television, so speak nice and clear. Tell us who you are and we'll...
Yes, so my name is Jeff Walford. I live on Reedsdale Road. My children were baptized at St. Elizabeth's Church, and they've received excellent care at Beth Israel Hospital. I have questions, and I think until they're answered, I would also like to speak in opposition to the proposal based on two different issues. The first is the unclear duration of the proposal, and the second would be to the potential impact on traffic pattern and traffic flow in that area. With respect to the first, the duration, we've heard that this is a request for temporary parking, and yet we've also heard that it will probably be 3 to 5 years before there's any suggestion in terms of what the long-term solution will be. With respect to the impact on traffic flow, the church sits in a very busy intersection. There's high traffic volume, particularly in the morning and the evening times when this shuttle will be running. There have been numerous accidents in that area. And I think adding additional flow to and from the St. Elizabeth's parking lot, either onto Randolph or onto Reedsdale Road, only increases the likelihood of additional issues. Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
Short and sweet. Do you have any questions of Ms. Buffett? Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard on this application? Okay, thank you. There's no such person. Mr. Corcoran, do you want to address Mr. Walford's issues, particularly the traffic flows and the traffic patterns and the intensity of use, particularly early in the morning and late in the afternoon, and the use of Randolph Avenue and this area is a cut-through from Randolph to other parts of Boston.
Well, we are, Milton isn't exposed an accident of its geography. We are a cut-through town. We've got thousands of cars coming through Milton every morning and every evening. We're at the top of 24, 95, 3, and 93 comes right through the middle, and 138 and 28 meet in the middle. So people cut through. A fair number of the employees from the hospital also come from beyond Milton's borders, and if they're coming, generally are coming from the south, they're either coming in on Randolph Avenue and taking this left on Reedsdale Road, or coming in Canton Avenue to Highland Street. I think 60 vehicles spread over a course of an hour or so during this sort of peak period when people are arriving equates to about 1 or 2 vehicles a minute. It's a very low impact, and I think at the end of the day, the traffic, the roads can handle it. The shuttle is being operated safely. I don't see that is it's an issue. It's an issue for everything that happens in Milton, but I think it's an issue that we sometimes focus on. It's difficult not to focus on traffic, but I don't think at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it is an issue that ought not to, it needs to be considered, but it ought not to result in the denial of this application.
Okay, but you haven't, I say you, I don't mean
We
that.
don't have a
obviously.
traffic study.
The hospital hasn't done a traffic study.
Nor is the church.
And I appreciate why you haven't, and I also appreciate having dealt with a few hundred traffic studies, how they're a lot like reports from psychiatrists. They're really not reliable no matter whom you hire. But did you or somebody from the hospital, I think we have a traffic commission in Milton, I remember that on the Reedsdale Road 40B. Has anyone talked with the so-called traffic commission, which is consisting, I think it's the chief of police and somebody else in the police department who has traffic skills?
Yeah, the traffic commission is an advisory board, advises the selectmen.
Well, they advised us on the 40B. I don't know
They
whether
do, they
were you involved in
they
that
don't
one?
make decisions, they make recommendations.
Well, that's all right, because they're not the Board of Appeals. I don't know that they
understand.
have the power to make the
You're
decision.
right, it's the police chief, the fire chief, the town engineer, the town DPW director, the town's bike person.
In fact, we had another application where you were representing the applicant. I don't remember it. It's on Adams Street. It's right at
475 Adams Street.
Yes, and the traffic commission was helpful, talking about access to that site and traffic patterns and all of that. I mean, is that something that's worthy of consideration here, or do you think it's not necessary?
I suppose if the board would find it helpful to have the traffic commission comment on whether the volume of traffic that is present here early in the morning and late in the afternoon is overbearing to the...
Do you know, I think in that 40B project, there was actually a traffic engineer who testified, but I thought there was some statistical evidence that the police department had. That was down the road. It's not right in front of St. Elizabeth Church, but there was statistical evidence of accidents and insurance claims and that type of thing. Has that study been looked at or have been, no?
I haven't, until the question's been asked, I haven't considered traffic to be an issue here.
Okay. Let me ask the $64,000 question. What if we granted this application, we give you the, obviously your client, the Archdiocese here, and maybe the hospital, the benefit of a special permit, and we extend it out as long as you want. You want it three years. And what after 6 months we find we're in a disaster? There are accidents out there, the neighbors are up in arms, traffic is tied up. Do we revoke the special permit?
The board always has the authority to revoke a special permit if there's a significant issue with the operation under the permit.
Right, but it may be just the volume. I'm not talking about irresponsible use of the premises. I'm going to assume that everything in your license agreement here and your guidelines are being complied with, but it's just that the 60 cars is just too much in that morning and afternoon time frame, and it's just being unduly disruptive.
I suppose if the traffic commission or the police traffic representative were to come before this board and provide evidence that this was a disaster because of this volume, then the board would be well within its right to revoke the permit. I think it would have to be a showing that there is, in fact, a disaster or something akin to a disaster, and that the
Well, it
volume...
could just be the volume of traffic is tying up the intersection, and the police chief says this is very difficult to deal with.
Fair enough. That would be evidence from an expert in the traffic and traffic control who would be providing that testimony before the board. I think the board would be within its rights to revoke the permit.
Right, but if we were giving you a 3, that may be somewhat of a subjective determination, though a lot of accidents isn't very subjective. But then I think we find ourselves in the Superior Court where you're suing us, trying to keep your permit for the next 2.5 years, and you probably would be successful there, the way the Superior Court adjudicates appeals in zoning cases. We have cases in Norfolk that are over 10 years old, and we can't get them heard.
I'm requesting a permit for as long as the board deems comfortable in granting it, 3 years being a reasonable time frame, I believe. The license to park is a year. It may be renewed, it may not be renewed. I think it's reasonable to request a license to be extended to 3 in the event that it's renewed, so that the parties and the board don't have to reassemble for the sake of renewing.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but some of our nursery disputes have been going on for 14 years, and we reassemble, it seems, every other week. Mr. Mullin, do you have any questions on traffic studies or traffic commission or any of the issues I've just been bantering with Mr. Corcoran? And you don't have to. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just...
I have several comments. I have several comments. I don't have any questions, though.
Okay. Mr. Lundberg?
I do have a question. On the shuttle coming from the hospital, do you know what the route of travel is? Is it coming up Reedsdale, making that left-hand turn across the double yellow into the parking lot, or is it making that left onto Otwell, coming out to Randolph, making a right onto Randolph, and then right into the parking lot, which, you know, doesn't entail crossing a double yellow? Might be something that might allay some concerns with respect to volume and flow and cutting across the double yellow at rush hour, just with the shuttle itself, not to speak of the 60-odd cars coming in and out.
I don't know, this is a larger map. I don't know whether they're, I'm assuming they're coming up Reedsdale. I don't know whether they're turning into the driveway.
I'll tell you, I was behind the shuttle a week or so ago, and that's what it did. It came up Reedsdale and
Took
went
that
across the double yellow into the parking lot, you know, on a fairly busy morning. So, and it caught my attention. And
So would you be suggesting that you go into the intersection and take a left?
I
And then
think
take another left into the back side of the parking lot?
further back on Reedsdale, they could make the left onto Otwell.
I don't think they're able to cross.
I
I don't think they're able to turn, to come in here. I'm not positive, but I don't think.
No, Otwell would keep going out and around to Randolph Ave, and then they would turn.
You would still be crossing the double yellow at that point,
Where?
back here.
Not at Otwell. There wouldn't be a double yellow there. There's an opening there. And you can come into, you can turn onto Otwell, continue on Otwell. It comes out to Randolph, and then take the
I suppose the,
immediate right, and then another immediate right into the parking lot without having to cross any double yellows. Just, I mean,
I suppose they could do that. That's now introducing,
right, how that burdens the neighborhood.
you know, a shuttle coming through the neighborhood.
Just in terms of,
I suppose the safer approach would be if you were to come up to the light at Randolph, take the left on Randolph, and then take the left into the parking lot.
right,
That's, you know, Randolph at that point is at least one lane in each direction. It's not
Right.
two.
right.
Mr. Corcoran, the shuttle that's going to be operated, is that going to be operated by an independent contractor, or is it going to be hospital-owned and run?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, do you have anything else you'd like to add? No. Okay, so why don't we,
Let me ask one question. What do you think about the, using the light and the left on Randolph?
I think that's fine. I think it's probably a safer route, and that could be a condition of the permit,
Yeah.
that would be the route to be taken by the shuttle. Now, coming out the other way, I suppose they could come out,
Take a
the
right,
right
you'd be
out.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, coming out, you'd be okay, yeah.
Okay, if there's
I have no further
no further evidence, let's at least end the evidence portion of the hearing at the present time and see if we can discuss this application and make some sense of it. Mr. Mullen, do you want to be heard first?
Is it Mr. Wolford?
Yes.
Yeah. So I appreciated his comments. I think the problem with this application is that we've got a problem that we need to address at the hospital. And it may not be ideal, but I think if it can be done safely, it's better to park, it's better to get some control over the parking than to have what appears to be an unsustainable parking situation at the hospital. So this issue of the special permit, the traffic, and the time, I think are all related. So I don't think we can look at this in isolation. In other words, it's not a standalone request of the Archdiocese to use the parking lot as much as it's an attempt by BID to get a handle on this parking problem. And while this is not an ideal solution, it's part of a solution, and I suggest it may be better to try to craft something that works, even if temporarily while we find a better solution, than to ignore it and to not do anything. So overall, that's my sense of this application. I think that, and you said it, John, Mr. Chairman, you know, this intersection at 28 and Reedsdale was much studied in that 40B, as I recall, and I think a high crash location actually, according to RMV data. But I think in an interesting way, the fact that there's a light there may help with controlling the flow of traffic in and out of the rectory lot, certainly on the exit and using a revised route. In other words, it seems to me that the van can more safely exit while the traffic is being held at the light, easier than if it were the free flow of traffic through the entire interchange. And then lastly, just in terms of the parking, I don't know that it's 60 more cars because a number of these cars are in the neighborhood anyway, right? So what it is it's the additional traffic on Reedsdale is really measured by the people who are coming from a destination on the other side of the hospital who wouldn't get into this area in the first place to drive the extra quarter mile or so. So it's actually a small volume, but it's at a bad time in a tricky area. But I think in terms of weighing the impact to the neighborhood and the substantial detriment, I think it tends to favor trying to do something here, due respect and recognizing Mr. Wolford's reasonable comments. So I have a couple thoughts. The first is I think 3 years is too long, and the permit is for a year. Every year permit we've issued for as long as I know. Has the provision that it can be reopened, so that I think is standard. But I also think we should have something about asking the hospital, putting an affirmative burden on the hospital to try to resolve their parking solution. It doesn't seem reasonable that we would grant this and not have a duty to try to solve the problem, because otherwise, I agree with Mr. Wolford, this is a 5-year problem, maybe a 10-year problem, maybe a forever problem. And you'd be parking there every day except Ash Wednesday and Good Friday for the rest of the time. And that's not the spirit of this. The spirit is it's temporary. So I'd like to suggest, and I know we're not the parking police of Milton, but I do think there has to be some burden on the hospital to make some positive steps towards resolving this. And I'm not sure it's just a capacity issue. You'd like to see some demand, some demand. I know it doesn't have good access to transit, and people aren't going to take bikes up that hill. I get all that, and I see people walking up that hill getting off of the bus in the morning. I know that's a tough hill, but there ought to be other creative solutions. I know the hospitals at Longwood are experts at demand-driven parking solutions, so I'd like to suggest to the board that we think about something like that. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Lundblom?
I agree, all very well stated.
I like your idea on the traffic plan. I'm sorry, I should have said that. I like the use of the light but I don't like going through Artwell.
No.
That doesn't help the people on Artwell.
You know, in my...
They're probably watching.
Yeah. My thought was whether Otwell or Randolph,
It's better, yeah.
not directing or instructing employees to do that, but more to the schedule of the shuttle itself. I mean, the intention is good here, I think. I'm just not sure if we have the right solution right now for all the reasons you mentioned, Jeff. You know, I think that a specific time schedule for the shuttle would be appropriate and helpful. A sign in the lot and maybe a sign at the hospital saying, you know, shuttle runs every, not willy-nilly, but every 20 minutes or every 15 minutes, and if that helps. Again, the duration of the permit, I think those comments were well stated, Jeff, and perhaps a specific statement on a specific route for the shuttle itself to travel. Not the most circuitous route, but something that is the safest route with respect to what Mr. Wolford had to say. Those are my thoughts at this point.
Well, my view is I think Mr. Corcoran presented a very, very good application for a special permit, but with no evidence. And that's what really makes me feel uncomfortable. I think that public safety has to be our primary concern. And we also certainly have to have concern with the hospital. I've driven through this intersection so many times. It's a torturous intersection to drive through, virtually from any direction, and particularly at 4 to 6. And I don't drive it at 7 in the morning, but I think I have once or twice. And I understand the hospital's need. I've been to the hospital where I couldn't find a parking space. And I drove around, and the valets are wonderful people, but they have limited space and limited time, and they want to close at 3:30 or 4 o'clock. So if you're there visiting a patient at that time, or you're an all-day visitor, you just keep driving around until somebody leaves. And if you had the misfortune of carrying bags, as I did, around the whole hospital building to get into the front of the building, because I'd fear getting lost going into the emergency room, or I'd be admitted to the emergency room. It's very frustrating, and this is a terrible problem the hospital has. I sat on at least 2 or 3 of these special permit applications for the hospital, and the neighbors are concerned with traffic, and they're concerned with light, and they're concerned with heights, and we had to go through all kinds of machinations to improve the air conditioning vents on top of the hospital and shield them off. So this is, and it's a testament, just as you said. I was going to say it. It's they're victims of their own success and circumstance. This is one of the premier orthopedic sites in Boston. People who don't want to go into B.I. Deaconess in Boston or don't want to go to the general, they come here. I know Dr. Burke, know his schedule. He's 4 months out or 5 months out if you want to have him do your knee. they're building units, they're building hospital rooms just to suit Dr. Burke and Dr. Shervin because of their success. Private rooms. And I think it's a wonderful thing for their practice. It's a wonderful thing for the hospital. But it's, as you say, it's a challenging location. And I don't pretend to be a traffic engineer. But in light of the concerns of Mr. Walford, is that how you pronounce it? And my own view of the application, we're not traffic engineers to try to figure out how to best get in and out of this parking lot. I'm not going to sit there in a chair at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning watching the traffic and counting cars and determining whether it's a risk. And I think that may be the present predicament that I have with the application. We want to help out the hospital. We want to protect the neighbors. And yet, at the present time, on this record, and I'm not talking about doing expensive traffic studies, because I know they're expensive and they're time-consuming, but we don't have the slightest idea as to how many accidents occur at that intersection, with what degree of frequency, and where do they occur? Are they at the intersection? Are they people coming out of the church parking lot? I don't know. I know taking a left-hand turn that Mr. Lundbaum was concerned about. With the traffic, I guess it's going, I'll say it's going west. It's going past the church and off towards the other part of Milton. People won't give you a break. You have to stay there in place, waiting for that traffic to either finish or waiting for that light to change to pull in there. So I don't want to be unduly technical, but we're not the traffic engineers, and I think we should have some basic traffic information from somebody, whether it's the chief of police or the traffic commission or whatever, that can give us some type of an assurance that these 60 cars coming in and out at that point in time doesn't pose a substantial risk to either the drivers pulling into this parking lot, the employees, or to the public at large who are just driving by the church. And so that's my thought, is that I think we need additional evidence.
May I then, understanding that your concern, may I request a continuance?
Oh, sure. That's what I'm going to suggest. I think I don't think it's going to take very long to talk to the chief, and you probably know the chief better than I do.
I can schedule a meeting with the Traffic Commission, next July meeting, present the matter.
I think it would be helpful because since we're not experts in this area, I think we'd be taken to task, and I think rightfully so, if we just allowed this application, which to me has merit. I understand it, but without having some information as to whether whether such a special permit is going to endanger the lives and safety of the public to a degree to which you may have to find other space. And I say that in the sense that if we did believe that was the case, then we're not going to shut you right down. I mean, I hope you're going to continue to, well, you are going to continue to use this parking lot in the interim period. And
I will speak to the hospital about using the route that we've at least considered with the shuttle service.
And I think then we'll be in a better position to make an intelligent decision. I agree with everything my colleagues have said. It's I think the hospital's issues are comprehensive, not easily resolved. I really don't think so. Unless they were going to take their specialized facilities and move them somewhere else. These are really tough issues, both from a land use planning standpoint and from a traffic standpoint. So I'd like to hear some more. Mr. Mullen, do you have anything else to say? So how long do you think you need?
I have a request to be before the Traffic Commission on another matter. I'm assuming that that is going to get scheduled for the week of July 9th.
Okay.
I think they meet. So if we were back either the week of the 16th or the 23rd,
Mary, don't we have hearings in that time frame?
We have one on the 25th of July,
Okay.
and we have one on the 11th of July.
Well, the 11th is too soon. On the 25th, who's sitting in that panel, do you know? Is it Virginia
You,
and
Virginia,
Mrs.
and Kathleen.
Kathleen? Okay. That's the 25th.
It's a Wednesday.
Mr. Muller, how's your schedule on the 25th? Are you able to do something perhaps on the earlier side rather than the later side? No. Okay, do we have?
I could do that.
Well, it's a question of either 7
That's fine.
or 9 o'clock.
That's fine.
But actually, the legal ads haven't gone in for the 25th yet, so we might be able to delay those and put this one on at 7:30, and put the other ones
I could do 7.
3 different.
No, I understand the difficulties coming from Boston. Mr. Lundbaum, are you available
I am.
at 7:30 on the
Yes.
25th?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we do that? Is that agreeable with everyone? So why don't we continue this hearing to the 25th of July at 7:30? And Mr. Corcoran, let's say by, well, you're meeting with the Traffic Commission on the 9th. Sometime a week or 10 days before the 25th? Do you want to supplement your filings with us?
I'll do that as soon as I can after the meeting with the Traffic Commission
And send a copy of your filing with the board to Mr. Walford. So you'll have that.
Yeah.
And then we'll be able to study it, and we won't have to waste a lot of time at the hearing on the 25th.
I know he said that he lives on Reedsdale Road. He didn't give it.
No, there wasn't.
Street address.
What, do you want to tell us well, you can do this off the record, so it's not on TV. And would you also provide Mr. Corcoran perhaps with the telephone number so that he could contact you and he'll exchange information? Okay? Fine with you, Mr. Corcoran?
Fine.
Okay, so we're adjourned until the 25th at 7:30, seeking further supplementation from the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need 2 minutes.
We're going to take a 2-minute recess, but if you want to come up and get set up, Mrs. McKettrick, that's fine. You all set, Mrs. McKettrick?
We are.
Okay, we're going to call to order our 8 o'clock hearing at 8:50. And this is the application of the Society for Preservation of New England Antiquities, DBA Historic New England. The application is dated June 5, 2014, and the applicant is seeking an amendment of a special permit that was previously granted. The applicant seeks the approval of a subdivision of the premises at 1452 Canton Avenue to allow creation of 2 parcels as shown on the plan filed with the board. and that this be issued as an amendment to the previous special permit, which was granted on August 13, 2015. The applicant suggests that the proposed subdivision does not involve or require any change in the approved physical layout or the operation of the Eustis Estate Museum. The so-called Eustis Estate is located in the Residence A zoning district. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate right, Board Member Stephen Lundbohm, and to my immediate left, Board Member Jeffrey Mullen. We're going to have as evidence at this hearing the June 5, 2018 application of the society, I'll call it. We have the May 30th, 2018 denial letter of Mr. Prondak and Mrs. McGettrick, Marion McGettrick of 10 Crown Street, Milton, representing the applicant, and she has filed with us a letter dated June 5, 2018, describing the operation, and I don't mean it in that sense, the architect, the museum, the plan that was approved in the special permit application, and the reason that the plan is seeking to be amended. And we have a plan of land of the subject property dated May 8, 2018, and we have a topographic plan of the subject property. Looks like it's 2015.
The original,
Yeah, originally.
the site plan.
So we'll have those plans as evidence, as we indicated in the first hearing. We'll hear from the applicant. People who have questions of this particular application to amend the special permit, and people who wish to speak in support or in opposition. So Mrs. McGettrick, welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Oh,
Delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. I have here tonight with me Diane Vieira. She's the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Historic New England. So if there are specific questions, Diane will be happy to answer them.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much. Diane was here, of course, for the original application, and I believe this is the same board that heard that application. So I just want to emphasize that this is not an application to change anything. What's happening is that Historic New England has decided to eventually sell the Yellow House, which is at 1452 Canton Avenue. They purchased all of this property, the property for the Eustis Estate and the Yellow House, which is 3 lots, around the same time, and with the purpose of protecting the view shed for the Eustis Estate, and in addition, possibly using the Yellow House for office space or programs. They've since evaluated that option and decided that it's not economic to do that, and they will be selling the house. However, they only want to sell the lot that the house is on, and they need frontage for that lot, so they'll be subdividing the front lot. That will provide frontage from one of the parcels for the back, the middle lot with the Yellow House. The other lot in the front is going to stay as a property of Historic New England. And in fact, that other lot has a little tiny corner of the entrance of the new driveway on it. That's why we're here tonight. Because when you approved the special permit, you approved a revised site plan and a new driveway. And the new driveway goes in to the right of the carriage house, or whatever the name of that structure in front is. And a corner of the opening area for the driveway is on 1452 Canton Ave. So because you approved the new site plan, the building commissioner has determined that area then is part of the approved site. And in order to make any change, and this subdivision is a change in the lot in the front, we need to come back to you and apply for an amendment to the special permit. That's not all that's required to approve the subdivision. We also have to go to the planning board and have an A&R plan approved by the planning board. The planning board always requires that if there is a Board of Appeals relief that's necessary, that be requested first before going to the planning board. So it's sort of a technical requirement, at least that's the way I view it. We're not changing anything about the operation, we're not changing the driveway, but because we're subdividing the lot that contains a corner of the driveway, we have to come back to you and ask you for permission to do that in the form, I think, of an amendment to the special permit. So that's the gist of the application. I would like to add a couple of things. You may be interested to know that this spring, the Eustis Estate was recognized with 2 preservation awards, one from the Victorian Society in America and one from the Massachusetts Historical Commission. And both awards recognized the interior and exterior restoration work and the public outreach components of their project. So they haven't been in operation very long, but they've already received 2 awards. I think that's something worth noting. And they happily intend to continue. The permit is one that's limited, and there are certain restrictions in terms of time. So far, as I know, the operation has been very good. What Diane did before the hearing was that she sent a letter out to all the abutters within 300 feet. I have copies of the letter here for the board because it's a 1-page summary, and I think it's a good summary of what this is and is not. And I believe 5, is that correct? 5 neighbors did call to say that they had received the letter.
We heard from 5 neighbors, either by phone call or via email.
And that it cleared up their concerns, because when they saw the notice, which is pretty, doesn't say that much, they weren't quite sure what was going on. So as far as I know, there are no problems, no objections, unless there's someone here tonight that might be expressing something like that. In addition to what I've just described, it's important to know 2 things. Historic New England is retaining the back lot from 1452 Canton Ave, as well as the front of the front lot. So they're keeping the part that abuts the Blue Hills and provides a sort of a pastoral view from the Eustis Estate. And it is their intention to use the preservation, the letter explains it pretty well, to have use their own preservation easement program to apply to the house when they sell it, so that although the owners will be able to make necessary repairs and some renovations, they will have to maintain the historic appearance of the house. And if you have questions about that program, again, I think Diane Vieira is much better qualified to explain it than I am. So that's the proposal. We have looked at it at length, actually, before coming to you to make sure that this was the right way. But we think this is required and that you do need to approve an amendment.
Well, thank you, Mrs. McKittrick. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
I'm interested in how it's going up there.
It's going very well. As of May 11th, we were open for 1 year. We opened May 11th, 2017, and we have gotten very positive feedback. We've had an awful lot of Milton community members through, which has been wonderful. And just under 50,000 people have come to the property for either tours or programs or events. So we're very pleased.
Any noise complaints?
We have not had any noise complaints.
I remember I lost my request to have that noise measured at the property line by John Leonard. I'm over it, though.
It's a grudge.
I was there.
How many events were up there for the year? Do you know off the top?
The events that we
Commercial
were,
event, do you have
we have only had 3.
Only 3?
We started out very slowly at the advice of this board and the neighbors, and we've been building the program.
And so next year you expect to have more? It's not that 3 isn't what you're thinking? You think you'll? Yeah, okay.
And we know we can have no more than 12
Right.
per year.
And this application, I know, I read Mrs. McKettrick's letter. The decision doesn't reference 1452. I'm quite sure I didn't know that the driveway was on 1452.
You're quite correct. I think it said that in my letter.
Yeah.
That, and I noted that, but the fact that the plan, and there had been a new plan drawn, of course, for this application, that it is physically located there, created a problem for the building commissioner, and even for me, I wasn't sure.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, that's,
Where the driveway is built is where it was proposed to be built. In other words, it's not like it got moved in the field. You always wanted it there. So were the board to amend this, you would want a specific reference that the new site, or the official site for, what is the number?
1424 and 1426
So
Canton Ave.
that
is
includes
used-
parcel A.
Yes. I think that's
That's
the way
what
to
you
do
want.
it.
So that's your site, yeah, that's the site.
And referencing
And that
the
will
new
match
plan.
up with the improvements that support the museum.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. If we were to do this, can 1452 be sold and used without any, is there anything going to happen to those lots that will cause an issue with compliance with zoning? Is there anything?
No, the only lot that would be sold would be the middle lot, that's a registered land lot, the
Yeah.
middle lot with the house on it.
Yeah.
And the front parcel B, is that correct? Parcel B.
Parcel B.
Parcel B
No one's
provides,
going to come back to us for 1452 looking for relief.
no, we have looked extensively at this question. We have been meeting with the building commissioner, we've been asking them what they could do and could not do with the house. And, you know, it's an existing, there are some aspects of the house that are existing non-conforming. There are a couple of accessory buildings that are closer to the lot line than allowed.
Yeah.
And they're existing, they've been there since, 1915 or even earlier. So we've explored that fully. We're not asking for any relief, and we will not be asking for any. And in fact, the preservation easement, I don't know what it's going to say, but I guess the purpose, the intention of Historic New England is to keep the buildings looking the same. I don't know whether that will extend to all the accessory buildings, but in any case, no. It will not be necessary for the new owner to come back to the Board of Appeals right away
Right
and tell
away.
you. Now, if they wanted to do something that they just weren't allowed to do under zoning, I mean, of course, they'd have to come back here for relief. But I wouldn't anticipate that would be too likely, given the preservation easement that's going to be applied.
The preservation easement will be on the portion of 1452 that's being conveyed?
Yes.
So that will attempt to preserve its general appearance? Is that the objective?
Right, the preservation easement it protects both interior and exterior features of the home that we identify as significant to be protected. It also protects the land itself from further subdivision or development. And we can also protect significant landscape features, for example, the stone wall at the entrance.
Think there's a market for the sale of that, notwithstanding the fact that you folks had trouble using it?
We do. It needs some work, but we think that there is a market for it. We hold preservation easements on 107 properties already, including 1400 Canton Avenue, just on the other side of the Eustis Estate, which we purchased for very much the same reason. It became available when we were purchasing the Eustis Estate, and we were concerned that it would be developed and that the view would change. So we purchased it, put preservation easements on it, and sold it back into private ownership.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Linville.
Does the amended special permit need to have something specific with reference to some language in the preservation easement, or are we making it a condition of the permit that?
1452?
Right.
Is that our burden or our responsibility? I don't think it is. I mean, I think it's a
I guess my
wonderful
view
thing, and I
would
think
be,
we should do it.
it's a very good thing that this is what the Historic New England intends to do, but we're not asking you to change anything about the original special permit. It's just because it happens that that driveway location is a little bit further over than maybe you even realized when you were approving it. It is shown, though, on the site plan. That's why I attached it, but it's very hard to read because you have to make it even bigger. I'm not sure that it should be a requirement. It's going to happen. But, you know, that's for you
Oh,
to
it's
decide.
certainly in your interest to have that, I would say. So, right, no, it was just a question, is it something we needed to address? If not,
I don't think so.
I don't have any other
Were you
questions.
going to say something, Mr. Mullen? No. Okay, I thought you did.
Any idea when this may go to market if we were to grant the amended permit?
Well, The way that the preservation easement process works is we have to get it through the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and that takes about 30 days. There's a whole process. We have documentary photography taken of the property, and then we go through the steps. So we anticipate that the property will be ready for sale around October. We have had a couple of people who have been interested in just seeing it preliminarily, just to kind of see, you know, what it looks like and what type of work needs to be done on it, but that's the time frame.
Yeah, it's a fascinating issue from an appraisal standpoint and a fair market value standpoint, because while ordinarily attaching those types of restrictions you would think would burden the property, the property is so unique considering its location with the Eustace estate and your use of the property, and that attaching these conditions may be considered by people who would like to purchase a historic house as a certification of its historic nature and something that would protect the premises and really add to its value rather than detract from its value. That's interesting stuff, but I don't have any further questions. Mr. Mullen? No. Do you have anything else you want to add, Marion?
No, I think we've said our piece.
Okay, so let's end the evidence at this. I'm sorry, let me just circle here. We have a quiet audience back there. Is there anybody who likes to speak in support of this application?
Well, I'd like to make some observations.
Okay.
I am
Well, you have to.
the family that abutted that property for years.
Sure. Hold on. Calm down. Just calm down. They're fine. Take your
My
time.
name's Mary Noble, and,
Where do you live, Miss Noble?
well, I live at Fuller Village, but
Okay, good for you.
the family that it abuts always has been part of the Hemingway property. And so I'm part of the Bartol side, which are the abutters, but I'm not a direct abutter. But I have old maps of interest that shows that the access to the house that we call Kelsey House, that's 1466, came from the Eustace property inside of Canton Avenue, past the house that was then taken on by Fred Eustace. So that's an interesting story. And the other is that there is added benefit that our property now, the Bartol property, is under conservation constraints with DCR. So it's doubly protected.
That's great. That's.
And I would love to have copies because not being an actual abutter, but I still would like it for our family records, this proposal.
Oh, I can get that for you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate very much. Is there anybody else who would like to be, who has any questions or wishes to speak in support of the application? Okay, there's no such person. And is there anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the request for this amendment to the special permit? Okay, there's no such person, so we'll, unless you have something to follow up, we'll end the evidence and discuss this application in open session. Mr. Lundvall?
Thank you, Mr. Lind. Thank you, Attorney McGettrick, another very informative application. From everything I've heard, it's been a tremendous success up there for the year that's been open. I'd like to give this board a certain amount of credit for that happening. We worked pretty hard with what we were presented last year, and it's turned out well from everything I've heard, as I said. I don't have any significant issue with the application. I think the intent is good, the idea is good. You know, if you can recoup some of your costs by way of a private sale, I think that's a good thing. The preservation easement is a good idea as well. Again, it's just a beautiful, magnificent site up there. I've been up since it's opened, and it's very special for the town. And so I think I would tend to vote in favor of the application.
Mr. Mullen, please.
I agree. I'm happy to fix any issues with that access road. I think the improvements look terrific, and I'm mostly glad to see that it's working. I think there was some, some concerns. So it's terrific, and I'm very much in favor.
I'd like to congratulate Mrs. McKettrick on a wonderful presentation, as always. I think this is an application that has merit. I agree with my colleagues. This has been just a wonderful use of the property by the society, and it was a great opportunity that was there, and thank you for seizing the opportunity and turning it into what you've done. I think it's terrific. I also think that selling the 14, whatever it is, I can't read it, 1452, without a preservation easement would be an absolute disaster. If somebody would knock that building down and put up something that is contemporary in nature or unseemly, it would be it would not be good judgment. So I congratulate the society on doing a wonderful job, having a wonderful facility. It's been great for Milton. It's preserved the site. It's prevented another 25 house lots being built on the hillside like crazy. And it's a gorgeous property, and congratulations. All those in favor of granting this application to amend the special permit as presented?
Aye.
Aye. So congratulations, thank you very much. And
Thank you very
nice to
much.
see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey, you want to do this one? Yeah. You're pretty good on me.
I started in the wrong spot, John.